After dying from illness and opening my eyes again, I found myself back in the year I came of age. The first thing I did after being reborn was to wait for the husband I deeply loved in my previous life to come and propose, but to my surprise, I received the news that he had married someone else. It turned out that my husband had also been reborn, and in this life, he chose to marry his first love, but he didn't know that with his mediocre talent. His smooth rise to prominence in his previous life was all thanks to my strategies. Since he chose to abandon me, I'd like to see how he fares in this life without me. Hello, everyone, welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. In the 10th year of Yonghua, the current Prime Minister Jiang Mengji passed away from illness at the age of 61. 1 month later, his wife, Madame Leng, also died of illness. Their children buried them together in a shared tomb, with the epitaph reading, "Harmonious as zither and harp, deep affection between husband and wife." The couple walked through life hand in hand, leaving behind a beautiful tale in the Jing dynasty, with everyone praising their marriage as a match made in heaven. As the heroine in this beautiful tale, I thought so too. At least, that was the case before I opened my eyes again, so when I found myself reborn back to the age of 15, my heart was filled with irrepressible joy, eagerly awaiting the Jiang family to come and propose marriage day after day. In my previous life, just after my 15th birthday, Jiang Mengji's parents had invited an official matchmaker and brought generous gifts to ask my father and mother for my hand in marriage. At that time, due to my father's prejudice against social status, he gave Jiang Mengji a hard time, believing that as a merchant's son, he was not worthy of the Prime Minister's daughter. He endured a lot of hardship to marry me. In this lifetime, I won't let my parents deliberately make things difficult for him anymore. I want to marry him with great honor and splendor. But I waited and waited, and even a month after my birthday had passed, there was still no sign of any movement from the Jiang family. Gradually, I grew impatient. Taking advantage of a moment while paying respects to my mother, I subtly brought up Jiang Mengji. Mother was flipping through the account book and looked up at me in surprise upon hearing my question. "Menga, why are you suddenly asking about this person?" In her mind, I had always been immersed in poetry and books, showing little interest in the talented scholars of the capital. She never expected that I would know of someone like Jiang Mengji. After a long silence, Mother finally spoke slowly. "Yesterday, the Jiang family already proposed marriage to the Wang family." The Minister of Revenue's household, I felt as if struck by lightning, hardly daring to believe my ears. Which Minister Wang's family? Which Jiang family? Is it the Jiang family from the west of the city? Seeing my pale face, my mother's tone grew urgent. "Of course it's the Jiang family from the west of the city. I was at the minister's residence yesterday and saw with my own eyes the Jiang family coming to propose marriage. How could it be false? I heard that Jiang Mengji fell into the water 2 months ago, and after being rescued, it was as if he had become a different person, much more composed and reserved, as if he had gained years of experience. He writes excellent essays and has won the favor of Minister Wang." My mother looked at me with concern. "Menga, do you have feelings for Jiang Mengji?" I had no time to process what my mother had said. My mind was filled only with the news that Jiang Mengji was going to marry someone else. My hands trembled so much I could barely hold the teacup, and the hot tea spilled over my fingers, scalding my right hand bright red. My personal maid, Xiaodao, gasped in alarm and quickly took the teacup from me, then hurriedly pulled out a handkerchief to wipe the water from my hand. "Miss, are you all right?" Mother sighed. "Although the Jiang family are merchants, now that Jiang Mengji has caught the eye of Minister Wang, the Wang family might be willing to form this marriage alliance. However, I noticed that Minister Wang's wife still seems to have some reservations about the Jiang family's background. If you truly have feelings for him, your father and I could swallow our pride and find a suitable matchmaker to sound out the Jiang family. It's just that the Jiang family has now climbed up to the minister's mansion. I'm afraid." I didn't respond. Quickly rising and returning to my own courtyard, "Miss, the Wang family just sent an invitation, asking you to attend their flower viewing banquet tomorrow." Seeing my distraught appearance, Xiaodao cautiously asked, "In your current state, should I have the steward decline on your behalf?" "Miss, the Wang family just sent an invitation, asking you to attend their flower viewing banquet tomorrow." Seeing my distraught appearance, Xiaodao cautiously asked, "In your current state, should I have the steward decline on your behalf?" "No need." I took a deep breath, a cold glint flashing in my eyes. "Go tell the butler that I will be there on time tomorrow. I want to see for myself what exactly is different in this second chance at life. You look truly beautiful today, miss." Xiao Dao said as she placed the last pearl-inlaid kingfisher feather hairpin in my hair, her admiration genuine. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, the gloom in my eyes from yesterday was gone. But carrying the soul of a 60-year-old, the brilliance in my gaze had lost the innocence of a young girl, replaced instead by a sharpness that saw through the ways of the world. Stepping into the prince's garden, the young ladies swarmed around like bees to honey. Elder sister Leng, it's been a few days since we last met, and you've grown even more slender, making your figure all the more graceful, Miss Leng. The fabric of this dress is truly unique. Is it the Nula tribute Misty brocade from Jiangnan? My father holds the highest official rank, serving as the chief minister of the court. In my previous life, I was also granted the title of first-rank lady. Long accustomed to such flattery that made me the center of attention, I responded to each with a smile. Before long, one of the main characters of today's banquet, Wang Xiangshu's legitimate daughter Wang Xiangxiang, also made her way over to me. She had taken extra care with her appearance today, adorned with pearls and jade, dressed in exquisite attire, her demeanor reminiscent of a young maiden's charm. So, Jiang Mengji's heart was captivated by such a delicate woman, one as tender as Dodder Vine, Sister Leng. Wang Xiangxiang affectionately linked her arm with mine and said, "A few days ago, the Jiang family from the west of the city came to propose marriage to my family." I feigned surprise. "Oh, is that so?" Wang Xiangxiang frowned and said, "Indeed, my parents are actually a bit hesitant and want to decline. Although Jiang Mengji has recently gained my father's favor and is quite handsome, his family background is ultimately too far beneath ours. My parents are afraid I'd suffer if I married into his family. If that's the case, why not just decline outright?" I picked up my teacup, gently stirring the floating leaves, asking as if casually. Wang Xiangxiang lowered her voice, a hint of pride in her tone. "To be honest, Sister Leng, young Master Jiang has some remarkable abilities. A while ago, he privately warned my father, saying that based on his observations of the night sky, there might be a severe drought near the capital, and advised my father to prepare early by stockpiling grain at low prices. My father was half convinced and bought a small amount. Who would have thought that the weather has indeed been getting hotter day by day lately? With no rain for half a month, and many farmlands outside the city have dried up and cracked, now grain prices are soaring. Because my father stockpiled grain in advance, not only is our family unaffected, but he also plans to respond to the emperor's call by opening the granary to distribute porridge, earning a good reputation." I sneered inwardly. So that's how it is. Rather than being clairvoyant, it was more like the memories he brought from his previous life. Jiang Mengji had also been reborn. The first thing he did after his rebirth was to choose to abandon me. No wonder I felt that in my past life. Although Jiang Mengji looked at me gently, I couldn't see intense love in his eyes. It turns out his heart belonged to someone else. I even recall that in my past life, there was a time when Jiang Mengji lost control of his emotions in the study, drank himself into a stupor, and smashed everything in the room into a mess. At the time, I thought it was because he had been impeached by the court officials and was deeply troubled. Now that I think about it, that day was exactly the day Wang Xiangxiang got married. With the one he loved marrying someone else, how could he not be heartbroken and drown his sorrows in alcohol? I couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle. "Miss Leng, what are you laughing at? What do you think I should do?" Wang Xiangxiang looked at me with some confusion, as Miss Wang said, "If Jiang truly has great talent, marrying him might not be a bad match after all." Wang Xiangxiang, having received a satisfactory reply from me, happily went off to chat with the other young ladies. This trip was truly worth it for me. If I hadn't come, I would still be foolishly clinging to the decades of marital affection from my past life, unable to let go of Jiang Mengji, and might have even begged my parents to fight for me. Now, everything from the past life feels like fleeting smoke, leaving only endless mockery. He, Jiang Mengji, believes he will be happier without me, thinking that with the foresight of rebirth, he can effortlessly rise to success and marry the one he truly desires. Then I shall grant his wish. I want to see just how far he can go, relying solely on those memories from his past life, without my careful planning and without the Cold family's unwavering support behind him. In our previous life, how many open and hidden attacks did I shield him from? How many troubles did I settle for him, fearing it might wound his male pride? I never mentioned any of it. And what did he do? He remained completely in the dark, truly believing that his smooth official career and steady rise to success were all due to his own efforts and talent. Fine, this is just perfect. I want to witness with my own eyes how he, before even reaching the heights he dreams of, falls hard from the peak into the dust, shattered to pieces. At this thought, I couldn't bear to stay a moment longer. I rose and took my leave from Lady Wang. I'm feeling a bit under the weather today and fear I might pass my illness to you and the other sisters, so I shall return home now. Lady Wang politely urged me to take good care of my health and had someone give me several sticks of calming incense. As I passed by Wang Xiangxiang, I whispered to her, seeing how well you and young Master Jiang get along. I suppose it won't be long before we get to celebrate your wedding with him. Wang Xiangxiang glanced at me shyly and gave a vague response. Her expression was one I knew well, the look of a young maiden in love. It seemed their marriage was as good as settled, back at the estate, since I hadn't eaten much at the banquet. I had another half bowl of rice during dinner. No sooner had I put down my chopsticks than I saw my father hurrying in from outside. As soon as he entered, he took off his official hat and exclaimed repeatedly, "How extraordinary! Minister Wang of the Ministry of Revenue seems to have foreseen the future." Months ago, he ordered people to purchase grain at low prices across various regions. Now, with the drought just beginning in the capital and grain prices soaring 3 times a day, he has opened a porridge kitchen in the west of the city to provide relief to the disaster victims. When this reached the palace, His Majesty was greatly pleased and praised him. The Wang family has now become a favorite in the emperor's eyes. I gave a light smile and took a sip of tea. Father, is the porridge distribution in the west of the city being handled by Magistrate Wang of Yongping County? I asked. I remember this Magistrate Wang was a notoriously corrupt official. Father Lung looked at me in surprise. Menga, this matter was just decided recently. How do you know about it so clearly? I set down the teacup and said, Father, don't worry, that Magistrate Wang is notorious for taking advantage of every opportunity. With such a large piece of fat meat delivered right to his mouth, I absolutely refuse to believe he could resist profiting from it. I'm afraid this disaster relief porridge won't last more than a few days before trouble arises. Father was half convinced by my words, but with no other options, he could only wait quietly for the right moment. Jiang Mengji and Wang Xiangxiang's wedding date was quickly set for the 6th of this month. I checked, today is the 1st. The wedding was arranged in such a hurry. It seems the Wang family has tasted the benefits and can't wait to tie Mengji down completely through this marriage. Jiang Mengji has also been restless lately. Relying on Minister Wang's support and his own achievements in stockpiling grain for disaster relief, he has been frequently attending gatherings of scholars and literati. Eager to build connections and get close to those court officials he was friendly with in his past life, he hopes to gain their recommendations and enter the court as an official soon to fulfill his ambitions. I took Xiao Dao to our usual Nichang pavilion to pick out new rouge and cosmetics. Just as we reached the entrance, I heard a voice from behind, somewhat cool and deliberately distant. Miss Lung. I paused in my steps. I had heard this voice for decades, and I didn't need to turn around to know it was that bastard. Jiang Mengji walked up to me. He had spotted me the moment he stepped out of the tea house. He halted, approached, and stared at me with icy eyes, convinced I had deliberately followed him. Jiang Mengji's tone carried a barely noticeable scrutiny and warning. Miss Lung, I thank you for your admiration, but I must ask you to maintain your dignity. I already have someone in my heart. Please do not persist in this entanglement. I nearly laughed in disbelief. So this heartless man truly believed, deep down, that I was still infatuated with him, that I would remain as devoted as in my past life, bearing his children, managing his household, and even risking my life for him in times of danger, tirelessly nursing him at his sickbed for half a month. I didn't even bother with him, stepping around him to enter the shop. Jiang Mengji, however, blocked my way, looking as though he wouldn't let me leave until we had this settled today. Master Jiang, I said, my voice low but clear enough for him to hear, you are now a man with a marriage engagement. Please choose your words carefully. To casually involve an unmarried young lady and tarnish my reputation, I, Leng Meng, still intend to marry, if my name is ruined because of this. Can you bear the responsibility? Jiang Mengji's face stiffened. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to be so sharp-tongued and to turn the tables on him. Just at that moment, Wang Xiangxiang also walked over from the silk shop not far away, accompanied by her maid, and immediately spotted Jiang Mengji confronting me. She hurried forward, affectionately linking arms with Jiang Mengji, and feigned surprise as she looked at me. Oh, Sister Lung, so you and my husband are acquainted. Although they were engaged, Wang Xiangxiang was still an unmarried woman, and calling Jiang Mengji husband already violated the rules of female propriety. I couldn't be bothered to correct her form of address, only wanting to quickly get away from these two people. Jiang Mengji took a deep breath, suppressing the displeasure in his heart, and turned to Wang Xiangxiang with a gentle expression. Before today, I had never had any interaction with Miss Lung. Jiang Mengji was eager to clear his name with me, afraid that Wang Xiangxiang would misunderstand. I paused in my steps as I was leaving, deciding not to let this heartless man off so easily. Pitifully, I complained to Wang Xiangxiang, "Sister Wang, you must stand up for me. I was just peacefully looking at the rouge and cosmetics in the shop when your husband suddenly blocked my way and wouldn't let me in." I pretended to wipe the corner of my eye and continued. He also inexplicably warned me to stay away from him, saying things I couldn't understand. I'm an unmarried young lady. If such words were to spread, what would become of my reputation? Sister Wang, please rein in your husband. Does he have some misunderstanding about me? Is he deliberately targeting me? As I spoke, I seemed on the verge of tears. Xiao Dao also stepped forward at this moment, indignantly adding, "Yes, Miss Wang. My young lady was walking perfectly fine on the main road when this Mr. Jiang suddenly barged over, accusing her of following him. How outrageous!" Wang Xiangxiang's face flushed and paled by turns. She looked at Jiang Mengji as if pleading for help, forcing a faint smile. I believe Mengji must have his reasons. Perhaps it's just a misunderstanding. I let out a long "oh," and before she could finish, I raised my hand and delivered a sharp, resounding slap across Jiang Mengji's face. So satisfying. I've long been fed up with his pretentiously serious face. The crisp sound of the slap instantly silenced the surroundings. Jiang Mengji covered his face, his eyes filled with disbelief and overwhelming fury. I glanced at Xiao Dao and gave her a meaningful look. She immediately understood and, mimicking Wang Xiangxiang's earlier tone, said slowly, "I believe my young lady must have her own reasons for hitting young Master Jiang. Perhaps it's a misunderstanding, Wang Xiangxiang." She wanted to vent her anger at me, but due to my father's power as the chief minister, she dared not confront me directly. She could only stroke Jiang Mengji's reddened cheek with heartache, comforting him in a low voice. Jiang Mengji's face was grim, his eyes dark and fierce, as if he wished he could devour me alive. I couldn't care less about how he might seek revenge. I was simply in a good mood. Young Master Jiang publicly slandered my virtue today, falsely claiming I harbor affection for him. Such utter disrespect. This slap is on behalf of all young ladies, to teach you to mind your reckless tongue, I declared with righteous indignation, then turned to Wang Xiangxiang. It also serves to dispel any doubts you might have, Miss Wang, lest you think I still carry a torch for him and allow unnecessary misunderstandings to arise between us later. Wang Xiangxiang indeed no longer entertained such thoughts. After all, what trace of past affection could possibly remain between Jiang Mengji and me now? Back at the estate, Xiao Dao was still trembling with fear. "Miss, why did you strike young Master Jiang so suddenly today? If word gets out and people exaggerate the story, you'll surely face another lecture from the master and madam." After a moment of contemplation, I replied, "It's of no consequence. Go and inform mother that I've come to my senses. I've reached the age for marriage discussions. And I ask father and mother to help me find a suitable match." Rather than waiting passively, it was better to take the initiative and thoroughly crush any unrealistic hopes Jiang Mengji might still cling to. In the first few days of the grain distribution at the city's west, the Minister Wang's household indeed followed the standard, providing sufficient food and porridge to the disaster victims, earning much praise. But before long, the rice given to the victims turned into a small amount of old grain, and the porridge became increasingly thin, almost indistinguishable from plain water. The disaster victims, unable to get enough to eat each day, gradually began to protest again. Seeing that the time was finally ripe, I changed into coarse cloth clothes, smudged my face with soot from the bottom of a pot, and mingled with the disaster victims lining up for porridge in the city's west. Accompanied by Xiao Dao, who was similarly disguised, amid the complaints and curses around me, I seized the moment and shouted loudly, "This is no way to go on. The porridge is getting scarcer, and sooner or later we'll all starve to death." Distributing porridge was originally the duty of the minister's residence, but now it's being embezzled by corrupt officials below. Brothers, let's go make a scene at the minister's residence and appeal to the emperor. I refused to believe Minister Wang would sit back and do nothing. My words were highly inflammatory, and upon hearing them, the surrounding victims, filled with righteous indignation, echoed my sentiments and surged toward the minister's residence. Seeing this, I quietly pulled Xiao Dao and retreated from the crowd, thinking of hurrying back to the residence to deliver this good news to my father, so he could prepare early and see if he could turn Minister Wang's troubles to the advantage of the Crown Prince's faction. Unexpectedly, just as I reached a quiet alleyway, a bright yellow sedan chair came straight toward me. As it was a prince's procession, Guards had already cleared the way ahead, leaving the road empty except for my maid and me. Lost in thought, I failed to notice in time and ended up colliding directly with the steadily moving sedan chair. How dare you? The sedan chair jolted to a sudden stop, and a cold sword was instantly pressed against my neck. I rolled my eyes discreetly, cursing my luck inwardly, knowing that running into him never brought anything good. The style and emblem of the sedan chair unmistakably belonged to the fifth prince, Chua Chen. Xiao Dao screamed in fright. "Miss!" I shot her a fierce glare, signaling her to shut up, quick-witted as she was. She abruptly turned her head as if she hadn't seen me and loudly cried out in the opposite direction. "Miss, have some mercy." Then, switching to a sobbing tone, she added, "Kind sirs, please spare some food." Her actions made her look like a completely deranged madwoman. I lowered my head to look at the sharp blade before me, thinking that a wise man doesn't fight when the odds are against him. With a quick shift of my eyes and a tight squeeze of my eyelids, I went limp and collapsed to the ground, preparing to feign unconsciousness. The sword-wielding guard clearly hadn't expected me to pull such a stunt and was momentarily at a loss. He turned toward the person inside the carriage and respectfully asked, "Your Highness, this beggar has offended you, should I kill her?" I quietly opened one eye to survey my surroundings, calculating my chances of escape. Just then, a hand with distinct, slender, and powerful fingers lifted the carriage curtain. I heard footsteps getting closer and closer to me, and then a shadow fell over me. Chua Chen stood before me, looking down at my face with a scrutinizing gaze. He was exceptionally handsome, with sharp eyebrows, starry eyes, and a tall, straight nose, but an aura of coldness that kept others at bay surrounded him. The next second, a cold, emotionless voice reached my ears. "Kill," I thought to myself. This is bad. Chua Chen is just as ruthless and cruel as I remember. I quickly opened my eyes, ready to introduce myself. Considering my father's reputation, he probably wouldn't actually take my life. Unexpectedly, before I could even speak, a barely noticeable flicker of strangeness passed through Chua Chen's eyes, and then a swift chop landed cleanly on the back of my neck. Everything went black before my eyes, and I completely lost consciousness. Hidden in the shadows, Xiao Dao watched helplessly as Chua Chen bent down, picked me up in his arms, and carried me straight into the sedan chair. The carriage curtain fell, and the procession continued on its way. Xiao Dao was scared out of her wits, and she immediately dashed toward the Prime Minister's residence, terrified that if she were even a second late, Chua Chen would actually kill me. When I woke up again, I found myself lying in a simple woodshed within the prince's mansion. The straw was a bit prickly, and the air was filled with a damp, musty smell. I patted my chest in relief. Thank goodness, I was still alive. I can't just die without knowing why. I have to live to see how miserable Jiang Mengji's end will be. Awake, a cool voice came from above. I looked up to see Chua Chen sitting on a pile of firewood with his arms crossed, watching me expressionlessly. I didn't have time to think about why he hadn't killed me. I quickly scrambled up from the ground, brushed the dust off my clothes, and tried to introduce myself to get on his good side. "Fifth brother, I'm Leng Meng." To my surprise, Chua Chen let out a light scoff, a hint of mockery in his eyes. "She would never call me brother like that." "Me, calling you brother won't work either. You're so hard to please." I quickly racked my brain, trying to recall if there was any shared secret between me and this Chua Chen that could bring us closer. Aside from the fact that he was a prince and I was the daughter of a minister, a relationship defined by hierarchy, a sudden inspiration struck me, and I blurted out, "Don't you remember me, fifth brother? I wet your bed when I was little." As soon as these words left my mouth, Chua Chen's face darkened noticeably, and he glared at me with displeasure. "Shut up." He paused, his tone still icy. "Even if you are Leng Meng, you'd better behave and wait for the chief minister to come and fetch you himself." I replied with a hollow smile. "All right, thank you, Your Highness the Fifth Prince." "Your Highness the Fifth Prince," I spoke cautiously. "This firewood shed is really uncomfortable. May I move to a guest room, or any clean room would do?" He looked me up and down disdainfully, taking in my dirty beggar's outfit, and asked, "Why aren't you calling me fifth brother anymore?" "I'm afraid Your Highness might not be used to it." "I'm quite used to it. Call me that again, and if I'm satisfied, you can choose any room you like." A wise man knows when to yield, so I quickly called out, "Fifth brother, move in then." After a pause, he added, "By the way, clean yourself up and change into decent clothes. Don't disgrace the eyes of this prince's residence." Meanwhile, outside the minister's residence, the agitated victims, stirred up by me, picked up stones and rotten vegetables from the ground and hurled them at the tightly shut gates of the minister's residence. Curses and cries blended into a chaotic uproar. Inside Minister Wang's residence, Minister Wang was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan, pacing frantically in his study. "My lord, what should we do now?" Lady Wang also wore a panicked expression. Jiang Mengji stood to the side, his expression equally grave. He hadn't expected the situation to escalate to this extent. "I thought that with my foresight, stockpiling grain and distributing porridge would earn my father-in-law a good reputation and pave the way for my own official career. Little did I know such a major blunder would occur in the actual execution. Father-in-law, there's no need to worry excessively," Jiang Mengji said thoughtfully. "I only suggested stockpiling a small amount of grain for emergencies, not that you should stake everything on it. Now it seems likely that Magistrate Wang, who was in charge of the porridge distribution, embezzled from it and secretly sold the disaster relief grain at high prices, which is what stirred up public anger." He cursed Magistrate Wang in his heart for his insatiable greed. In his previous life, although this magistrate had engaged in some minor misconduct while overseeing the grain distribution, he had never made such a huge mistake as embezzling disaster relief supplies. Why had he become a different person in this life? Minister Wang stomped his foot and said, "What's the use of saying all this now? The matter has already reached the emperor's ears. The emperor has sent an imperial censor to audit the accounts. If any shortfall is discovered, I'm afraid the emperor will hold us accountable." Jiang Mengji's eyes sharpened, and he made a decisive decision. "At this point, there's only one way. We must buy back all the grain that Magistrate Wang secretly sold, no matter the cost, to cover the deficit. Then, we'll shift all the blame onto Magistrate Wang, claiming we were deceived by him." Minister Wang gritted his teeth. "It seems we have no choice, but that grain." Soon, the dispatched men returned to report that the market price of grain had become outrageously high. "Master, young Master Jiang, we found out that Magistrate Wang originally sold the grain secretly to several grain merchants in the city at 2 taels of silver per dan. Now, when we try to buy it back from them, they're demanding 100 taels per dan," the steward said with a pained expression, and they said, "This is only because of the minister's reputation. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't even be willing to sell." "What?" Minister Wang's vision went black, and he nearly fainted. How much did he sell back then?" According to the investigation, Magistrate Wang resold at least 100 dan of refined rice. Slap! A resounding slap landed hard on Jiang Mengji's face. Minister Wang trembled with rage, pointing at Jiang Mengji and scolding, "You! Why did you swear back then that Magistrate Wang was trustworthy? Now you've caused me to lose nearly 10,000 taels of silver to fill this hole for nothing." Wang Xiangxiang, pale with fright, quickly supported Jiang Mengji and tearfully defended him. "Father, how can you blame Mengji? How could my husband have known that Magistrate Wang would be so audacious?" In the end, Minister Wang reluctantly paid a high price to buy back the grain. Barely making up the deficit before the imperial censor checked the accounts, he also gathered evidence of Magistrate Wang's corruption and made him the scapegoat, thus narrowly averting the crisis. As for me, I quietly had my father give the hush money extorted from Minister Wang to Chua Chen, so he could find skilled craftsmen to build water diversion channels and alleviate the suffering of the disaster victims as much as possible. Despite this incident, the marriage between Jiang Mengji and Wang Xiangxiang proceeded as planned. On the day of their grand wedding, the ceremony was quite splendid, but those with a discerning eye could see the weariness between Minister Wang's brows. As the daughter of the chief minister, our household naturally received an invitation. My father and elder brother were unwilling to attend due to political differences, so they sent me in their place. Surprisingly, Chua Chen also made a rare appearance at the wedding banquet. He usually kept to himself and seldom attended such social events. Chua Chen and I entered the Wang residence one after the other. He was dressed in a dark brocade robe today, which made him look even more dashing, though his expression remained as aloof as ever. For some reason, he took a seat beside me. Our occasional exchanged glances, to outsiders, seemed to carry an indescribable, ambiguous meaning. In his previous life, Jiang Mengji had never witnessed any interaction between me and Chua Chen. He remembered that this Chua Chen had an eccentric personality, disliked political maneuvering, and later even volunteered to guard the border, spending his entire life in military service, almost never setting foot in the capital again. It was precisely because of his presence at the border that the northern frontier of the Jin dynasty remained stable. Therefore, Jiang Mengji merely followed protocol by stepping forward to exchange greetings with Chua Chen, politely uttering a few formalities before paying him no further mind. In his view, This Chuachen lived a reclusive life, stayed out of court politics, and was of no use to his own career. On the other hand, when the second prince arrived with his family, Jiang Mengji immediately put on a beaming smile and rushed to greet him, attending to his every need with utmost diligence. Eventually taking a seat beside the second prince and engaging in lively conversation, I was not surprised by his choice. After all, in the previous life, it was this seemingly virtuous second prince who ultimately overthrew the crown prince and ascended to the throne as emperor, and Jiang Mengji, thanks to his early alignment with the second prince, was able to rise rapidly in his career later on, eventually becoming the prime minister, with memories from his past life. Jiang Mengji would naturally spare no effort in this life to cling even tighter to the second prince's coattails. I took a gentle sip of the clear tea in my cup, my gaze drifting almost imperceptibly over Jiang Mengji and the second prince, Chuachen, noticing that I had been staring in Jiang Mengji's direction, thought I was still hung up on my old feelings and suddenly spoke up, his tone laced with a barely detectable sarcasm. What? Taken a fancy to Jiang Mengji? If you have, I wouldn't mind asking His Majesty to grant you as his concubine. It would at least fulfill your infatuation. I nearly spat out my tea. I already thought Jiang Mengji had a few screws loose, and now it seemed this Chuachen wasn't much better. Thank you for your great kindness, Your Highness Chuachen, but such an immense fortune is better left for someone more deserving. I set down my teacup and spoke with a serious expression. Jiang Mengji also seemed to find my gaze toward him rather odd today. Seizing a moment during the toasts, he sidled over again and whispered in a low voice, Miss Lung, I know you're still resentful, but there's no chance for us anymore. However, for old time's sake, if you truly wish to help me, I can give you an opportunity. Your father is the current chief minister, highly favored by the emperor. If you could put in a good word for me in front of him and help me secure an official position sooner, I promise I won't treat you poorly in the future. Is this guy's face made of city walls? Young Master Jiang, I tried to keep the disgust out of my voice. Your father-in-law, Minister Wang, is currently in the emperor's favor. With his support, why should you worry about your future? Why trouble my father with such an unnecessary gesture? As I made to stand and leave, Jiang Mengji actually grabbed my sleeve, his eyes holding a mix of pleading and threat. Miss Lung, given our acquaintance, surely you won't refuse to help me with such a small favor. If you assist me just this once. I tried to shake off his hand with force, but Jiang Mengji held on tightly. Just as we were locked in this standoff, a powerful force suddenly came from the side, wrenching my wrist free from his grasp. I looked up and saw it was Chuachen. At that moment, I felt my cheeks grow hot and my heart beat unnaturally fast, seeing Chuachen intervene once again. Jiang Mengji's face flashed with anger, but due to the other's status, he had to suppress his displeasure and reluctantly bowed to him. He then turned to me and said stubbornly, Miss Lung, you must keep the promise you made to me, or else don't blame me for never seeing you again. I waved my hand helplessly, signaling for him to get lost. How did I not notice how narcissistic he was in my past life? After Jiang Mengji had gone far away, Chuachen looked at me coldly and asked, What did you promise him? I brushed it off casually. Oh, I promised that after he dies, I'd remember to burn paper money for him during festivals, so he can be reborn into a better life and not be so annoying next time. Chuachen, he didn't seem to expect me to say that. The corner of his mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. For a moment, an awkward silence fell between us. After a while, he suddenly said, This prince recalls that you are also approaching the age of marriage. I blinked and looked at him with a smile. Fifth brother hasn't married yet. Why should a little girl like me be in a hurry? Chuachen stared at me for a long moment before letting out a soft sigh. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he shook his head and said, Never mind. I didn't understand what he meant, but I nodded and said, Then I'll go back and get something to eat. After being pestered by Jiang Mengji for so long, I'm actually quite hungry. After the wedding banquet, the second prince and the Wang minister's residence indeed grew closer. The second prince seemed to have also recognized Jiang Mengji as his advisor, frequently visiting the minister's residence. With the second prince's special favor, Jiang Mengji gradually rose in status among the noble youths of the capital, often gathering friends and companions to drink, compose poetry, and discuss state affairs with various officials. However, the finances of the minister's residence were tightly controlled by Minister Wang. Although he appreciated Jiang Mengji's talents, he was not willing to easily hand over the financial authority to his new son-in-law. So, while Jiang Mengji appeared prosperous on the surface, He actually had little extra money to handle the increasingly large social expenses, yet he was an extremely proud man, always generous with his money. After making some careful inquiries, I learned that Wang Xiangxiang, out of concern for her husband, had secretly begun selling her dowry jewelry to subsidize Jiang Mengji, helping him build connections and manage relationships. The officials Jiang Mengji was courting were mostly from the second prince's faction, such as the ministers of war and rights. In the previous life, the crown prince was deposed and confined to the cold palace after being exposed for secretly practicing witchcraft to curse the emperor. Looking back now, it's likely that the second prince and Jiang Mengji had a hand in it behind the scenes. Although the crown prince was indeed somewhat weak and incompetent, hardly a wise choice for the throne, he would never have had the nerve or the cunning to use witchcraft to curse his own father. That day, I was taking a short rest in the pavilion of the estate when Chua Chen appeared before me again, unnoticed. "What are you thinking about? You seem so lost in thought," he asked. "I was thinking about the crown prince," I replied. "The crown prince and I were not close, but as the empress's legitimate son, he was gentle and kind. Had he not been framed by others, he would never have met such a tragic end." Chua Chen's face instantly darkened, his tone carrying a barely noticeable edge of malice. "Why think of him out of the blue?" I looked at Chua Chen seriously, mustering my courage. "Fifth brother, could you do me a favor?" Chua Chen raised an eyebrow. "Why should this prince help you?" I bit my lip. "The crown prince is also your elder brother. The second prince is ambitious and ruthless if we let him succeed. I fear that in the future." "Then why are you so concerned?" Chua Chen interrupted me, his gaze sharp and scrutinizing. I met his eyes and replied candidly, "For no other reason than justice, and for the Lung family to find a measure of stability in these treacherous court politics. Fifth brother, if you can save the crown prince from peril, no matter who ascends the throne in the future, you will have the merit of protecting the heir. As for compensation, whatever you desire, as long as the Lung family can provide it, we will not refuse." Chua Chen fell silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "Lately, my mother has been urging me to marry with great urgency." I pondered carefully. In his past life, he indeed never married. Could it be there was some unspeakable difficulty? Perhaps a hidden ailment, or a preference for men, not wanting to harm an innocent woman? I nodded thoughtfully. "Fifth brother, rest assured, I will find an opportunity to comfort Consort Yun and help her come to terms with it. After all, such matters are beyond one's control and cannot be forced." Chua Chen's temple twitched as he took a deep breath and said word by word, "What I mean is, I think it's time for me to take a wife." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "Fifth brother is such a good person and comes from such a prominent family. There must be many noble ladies willing to marry you." When I was young, I did dislike Chua Chen a bit, partly because he was too handsome, always making everyone around him pale in comparison. His temperament was mischievous and domineering. He caused trouble everywhere with his breathtakingly beautiful face, almost a waste of such looks. Yet, ironically, he had the most admirers among the noble ladies in the capital. Chua Chen stared intently at me. "Then who do you think I should marry?" I thought about it. If he were to marry, there would have to be boundaries between us, and we wouldn't be able to meet and talk as freely as we do now. A strange, indescribable pang of sorrow unexpectedly brushed through my heart. Just as I was about to casually suggest a few names of noble ladies from families on good terms with the Lungs and of upright character, I heard Chua Chen speak slowly, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "Go ask His Majesty to issue an imperial decree granting his approval for my marriage to you." "Me, her, this. Isn't this moving a bit too fast?" Seeing my stunned expression, Chua Chen added, "Our marriage would mean an alliance between the chief minister's residence and the fifth prince's estate, enough to counter the second prince. As for the crown prince, I will find a way to protect him." That's actually a pretty good proposal. It's also fine. Marrying Chua Chen is much better than getting entangled with someone like Jiang Mengji again. "Alright," I nodded in agreement, "but you and the second prince have never gotten along, and now with the crown prince's matter, I'm afraid he'll hate you even more deeply." Chua Chen snorted coldly. "He hates me. Does that mean I should be afraid of him?" Not long after, the imperial decree was issued, and my marriage to the fifth prince, Chua Chen, was settled. When Jiang Mengji learned the news, he deliberately found an opportunity to confront me. "Menga, why are you marrying that good-for-nothing Chua Chen? Aside from having a better family background, how is he any better than me? You clearly like me. Why not come to my side? Even if you can't be my official wife, I will definitely protect you and give you the wealth and status you desire." I glanced at him with disdain. Is this man insane? Lord Jiang, I recall you were devoted to Miss Wang, weren't you? Aren't you afraid your words might hurt her feelings? Jiang Mengji said indifferently. Xiang is gentle and understanding. She will comprehend my intentions, for our future. She is willing to make sacrifices. He paused, then added, I heard you embarrassed Xiang at the Wang family banquet. After all, my humble wife comes from a less prominent background and lacks the experience to understand the etiquette between the palace and noble families. She unintentionally offended you. In this regard, you are indeed more intelligent, proper, and reliable. I couldn't hold back any longer and sneered. Jiang Mengji, you really are as narcissistic and shameless as ever. Jiang Mengji returned to the minister's residence. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Leng Meng marrying Chua Chen was a betrayal and humiliation to him. He pushed away Wang Xiangxiang, who had come to offer her concern, and angrily said, That bitch Leng Meng, how dare she look down on me? How dare she marry that good-for-nothing Chua Chen? If only I had married her. With the chief minister paving the way for me, why would I worry about not rising to success? And you useless thing, what can you do for me besides crying? Wang Xiangxiang was shoved to the ground by Jiang Mengji, her hairpins and ornaments scattered, leaving her in a disheveled and humiliating state. As she looked at the man before her, whose face was twisted with rage over his lack of power, the last glimmer of hope in her heart turned to ashes. She gritted her teeth, a flash of ruthlessness in her eyes. Husband, don't be angry. I can help you get her. Jiang Mengji's eyes lit up. What's your idea? Wang Xiangxiang lowered her head, her voice as faint as a mosquito's hum. But she can only be your concubine. I am your rightful wife. Jiang Mengji wrapped his arm around her shoulder. Of course, after the way she humiliated me today, it's already a blessing for her that I'm willing to take her as my concubine. A few days later, Wang Xiangxiang sent me a personal invitation, asking me to visit her residence for a discussion, claiming there was an important matter to discuss. I snorted coldly, unsure what trick she was playing, placed the invitation on the table, and agreed to her request. On the day of the banquet, I was startled to realize that Wang Xiangxiang seemed to have changed, flattering me with an overly deliberate manner. She personally poured tea for me and persuaded, Sister Leng, I know you have feelings for my husband. Why not drink this cup of tea, and we can talk slowly? I looked at the barely noticeable ripples in the tea and sneered inwardly. Truly, the pitiful have their detestable sides. To keep a man who has changed his heart, she would resort to such despicable means. I picked up the teacup and, under her expectant gaze, poured it out. Wang Xiangxiang, however, smiled. She leaned in close to my ear and whispered softly, Sister Leng, you don't actually think the drug was in the tea, do you? Soon, an unusual heat surged from deep within my body. The effects of the drug came on quickly. I felt my consciousness gradually fading, my whole body growing weak. Wang Xiangxiang called for the servants to move me to the side room. I pulled out my hairpin and stabbed wildly at him, buying myself some breathing time. After thinking for a long time, I realized the drug must have been applied to the waist token. Before entering the mansion, the guard at the gate specifically asked me to open the invitation for inspection. After checking, he handed me the waist token, saying that the Meng residence had recently suffered a theft and was temporarily issuing tokens as passes. I saw he was wearing an identical token at his waist, so I put it on without suspicion. I was thinking about how to escape, and the next second, Chua Chen, who had secretly followed me, pulled me into his arms. Smelling the familiar scent on Chua Chen, I closed my eyes in relief, letting myself fall into the darkness. When I woke again, I found myself lying on a soft bed. But it was neither my own chamber nor a guest room in the minister's residence. Beside me, Chua Chen sat by the bed fully dressed. Seeing me awake, there was a hint of barely noticeable unease in his eyes. I moved my body a little. Aside from feeling sore and exhausted all over, there was no discomfort. My memories of last night were somewhat hazy, only recalling that I had been drugged. And then, fifth brother, was it you who saved me? I asked with some uncertainty. Chua Chen nodded, the tips of his ears slightly reddening. You were drugged with Heroine powder. As a prince, I couldn't possibly hand you over to someone else. I didn't feel repulsed. Instead, I breathed a huge sigh of relief. Thank goodness it was him. Chua Chen has a great physique and an absolutely stunning face, by any measure. I didn't lose out. Leng Meng. Chua Chen suddenly called my name with a serious tone. Now that we have become husband and wife in reality, may I ask for a proper status from you? He looked at me, a trace of nervousness in his eyes. Why? Chua Chen licked his lips. Since I was 7 years old, I have had feelings for you. 7 years old. It was the first time I met Chua Chen. I turned my face away, finding it absurd. At that time, my teeth hadn't even fully grown in, and I still wet your bed. How could you have liked me? It was when you, to make amends, forced your lifelock onto me and said you were willing to take care of me for a lifetime. So I had sold myself off that early. I looked at his handsome face, recalling his tenderness and loss of control from last night, as well as his cautiousness at this moment, and nodded with a smile. I'm willing to give you a title. A few days later, the second prince colluded with some important court officials in an attempt to force the emperor to abdicate and seize the throne. As his key advisor, Jiang Mengji was naturally deeply involved. However, I had long been aware of their plan. I informed Chua Chen of the second prince's scheme in advance. Chua Chen joined forces with ministers loyal to the emperor, setting a trap to catch them all and crush the second prince's conspiracy in one fell swoop. In the end, the second prince was ordered to commit suicide, while Jiang Mengji, Minister Wang, and others were sentenced to immediate execution. The Wang and Jiang families were to be exterminated to the 9th degree according to the law. Wang Xiangxiang, being within the 9th degree of relation, was also scheduled for execution alongside Jiang Mengji on a chosen day. The day before the execution, Jiang Mengji roared in the dungeon, "I want to see Leng Meng. I want to see Leng Meng." I stood in the dark, damp prison, separated from him by a cold iron bar, as if 100 years had passed between us. He was wearing a prisoner's uniform, his hair disheveled, his face covered in filth, no longer the spirited man he once was. Menga, save me. As long as you get me out of here, I'm willing to serve you like an ox or a horse for the rest of my life, to be your slave. He saw me, as if grasping at the last straw, rushed to the railing, pleading with tears streaming down his face. I watched him quietly, looking at his still deluded face, feeling a deep calm within. Jiang Mengji. From the moment I woke up after my rebirth, I thought you would come to propose to me just like in my past life. But you didn't. From the moment you chose Wang Xiangxiang and abandoned me, the bond between us was already severed. You are greedy, selfish, arrogant, and even go so far as to kill the innocent and frame the loyal. You truly deserve to die. In my heart, you're not even worth a single strand of Chua Chen's hair. I heard you'll be executed by 1,000 cuts tomorrow. May you rest in peace on your final journey. On the road to the underworld, Wang Xiangxiang must be waiting for you. Only then did Jiang Mengji realize that I had also been reborn. His mouth fell open in shock, his eyes filled with disbelief and endless regret, yet he remained speechless for a long time. It wasn't until my figure was about to disappear at the end of the prison cell that he suddenly awoke as if from a dream and let out a heart-wrenching cry. Menga, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Give me another chance, Menga. Jiang Mengji's desperate cries echoed through every corner of the prison. Unfortunately, I was already far away. In this life, and in all the lives to come, I would never hear them again. Several years later, a new emperor ascended the throne. Changing the era name to Kaiyuan, the emperor and empress were deeply in love, treating each other with the utmost respect, and together they ushered in a golden age, in the imperial garden. The young emperor held his empress close, watching their 2 children play and laugh at their feet. "Fifth brother, you've been secretly smiling ever since you returned from the morning court today. Did something good happen?" I asked curiously. The new emperor, Chua Chen, lowered his head and planted a kiss on my forehead, his eyes full of affection. At the morning court today, the censor was once again nagging about my empty harem and lack of heirs. So I told them that the empress once said that in her heart, no one can compare to me. I burst out laughing. And then, Chua Chen said triumphantly, raising an eyebrow. The entire court naturally didn't dare say another word. He paused, then added, "By the way, Empress, today the Prime Minister said it's time for me to appoint a crown prince. The more I think about it, the more I agree. That way, I can abdicate and take you traveling to enjoy the mountains and waters." I shook my head helplessly and gave him a reproachful look. "Your Majesty, be serious. You've been saying this since last night. My ears are about to grow calluses." Chua Chen paid no heed, holding me even tighter and whispering in my ear, "Menga, having you is enough for me. The sunlight was just right, and the years were peaceful. In this lifetime, I have finally found my true destined love."